like all living creatures, the human beings has desire and needs, and each of these hopes, these diverse wants, should be fulfilled more or less intensely, depending on the nature of the want, depending on the personality. Now, for the human being who is conscious and more free, some of these particular wants can be ignored, can be suppressed, can be delayed in time, either naturally, because of life events, because of context, because of aging, because of work on oneself, what people can call wisdom. So, but basically each person construct his existence around the pursuit of the wants that are important to him, in particular the needs. We can call the needs the type of satisfaction that one cannot be deprived of, right? Therefore, they're considered necessary, and it would be too painful to do without satisfying them. It would be too intolerable, right? Now, everyone, all of us, have a sort of built-in axiology in terms of those wants, those needs, those expectations. We have a hierarchy of values where we give importance and priorities to specific needs, which become more important than others, which sort of defines our personality. Now, the gradation of those needs can be very, very diverse, or at least their cause. It can be based on personal experiences, familial influence, cultural determination, or simply the mysterious dynamic of what constitutes an individual character, which we cannot really explain, something fortuitous. Now, most of those times, those needs remain on the pre-reflexive level. They're not conscious, they're not thought about. We just act on the basis of them. Yeah, we experience them as a feeling, as some internal drive, as an impulsion. They're not really conceptualized. They're not really analyzed. The only moment where this will happen is when someone engage into some rational introspection. So, as a shadow of these needs, anxiety sets in, right? When we cannot satisfy these needs. Surreptitiously, it insinuates itself. Yeah. And very often we're anxious. We want things. We're anxious about not satisfying those needs, but we don't really know the nature and the cause of these needs. Yeah? So the fear of not satisfying something that is considered vital, of not accomplishing or obtaining something we strongly covet, is problematic for us. That's when pain sets in. That's where anguish comes from. And this anxiety is twofold. On one side, it provides incentive and motivation for our existential project. It is what makes us get up in the morning and moves us all day long. It is the vector that structures and directs our life, whatever it is. We want to be rich or famous or creative or get knowledge. But at the same time, this need constitutes a source of worry, a source of discomfort or pain, and it becomes a permanent preoccupation, both emotional and intellectually. And therefore, it can introduce trouble and chaos in our mind, to the extent it can become overbearing and make our life impossible. When something is really a strong existential or psychological demand and we cannot satisfy it, then it can become quite painful. So in this presentation, we want to examine some of those typical needs and examine the anxiety that they carry with them when they're not satisfied. Yeah. And just to give a couple of examples, one is the fear of death. Now, some people are more worried about dying than others. Now, of course, you can say that most human beings are concerned with dying and prefer not to die and stay alive. There's some kind of conatus, as Spinoza calls it, where we want to persevere in our being. Yeah. But the idea of dying is more of a problem for some people than others. So they will be worried about their health, about any situation that is dangerous. When other people who are less worried about this will take risk with their own life, will accomplish or try to accomplish certain things that are dangerous because they're less worried about dying. So an example there but at the same time that can make someone become a doctor or take care of the health, because when we are worried about dying, it is both in our own dying, but generally as well it's the dying of other people, is death as a general concept. So death is an example of something that drives us to accomplish something, and as well can be a source of anxiety and fear. Yeah. And for now, I'll just take a second example, which is the fear of not being loved. Now, some people, in the way they behave, in their relation, in their psychology, are very concerned about being loved. They want to be loved, although we can see that often it's connected with a lack of love for themselves, so they will look for the love of other people. Now, again, this can drive them to accomplish certain things where they will please other people, will try to make other people happy, so they're loved by them. But at the same time, they can be very nervous about the fact of not being loved and never having enough love. Even sometime in the consultation, I talk with people that seem to be loved by their surroundings, by their family, but it doesn't matter. They're anguished either of not having enough love or losing this love by being betrayed, by being abandoned. So they're very worried about it. So again, in this example, this wanting to be loved can drive us to certain type of behavior, but it can be a sort of anxiety. So there's a number of other issues that we can deal with, which is a sort of a little list of the classical drive, anxiety, because they're both, as I said, both at the same time. One is relation, to have relation and to fear loneliness. Another one is to look for recognition, to want to be recognized, and therefore to be forsaken is a source of anxiety. Another example is usefulness. Some people definitely want to be useful. To be useful is what will give them value, what will give them worth, what will give them purpose in life. And the idea of being useless is rather terrible concept for them. That would make them basically worthless. Another example is freedom. Some people are very concerned about freedom, so they're very anxious about authority, about rules, about constraints. So they will act from the standpoint of being free and be worried about losing freedom. So just to make finish a bit of little list, some people worried about being smart and not stupid. Some people are worried about reason, not and fear insanity. Some people worry they're greedy, they want to get things from wealth, and they fear poverty. So there's basically there's about, identified in the work throughout the years, sort of more or less 20 classical source of anxiety in the human being. But generally, they're all forms of nothingness. If there is a matrix, a determinant criteria, for for all these different concepts is the idea of nothingness, that we would have nothing, because man simply cannot be satisfied just with living, with eating and getting up and moving, but he needs fulfillment. He needs plenitude, which implies to have fulfillment, and the idea of nothingness. So it's just for most people, nothingness is a bit meaningless concept, so they will transfer this nothingness in other terms, like, for example, not being loved, or being very useless. But basically, our anxiety is connected ontologically, existentially, psychologically, to the idea of nothingness. So that's basically a little summary of what I will present about fear of anxiety.